Sounds True presents Waking from the Trance, a practical course on developing multidimensional awareness with Stephen Wolinsky. Stephen Wolinsky is the founder of quantum psychology and the author of numerous books, including You Are Not, The Beginner's Guide to Quantum Psychology, and I Am That I Am. And now, Waking from the Trance, Session 1, Introduction to Quantum Psychology, with Stephen Wolinsky.
So the first question is, why quantum psychology? And obviously, what is the difference between quantum psychology and other forms of therapy? In most forms of therapy or psychology, the purpose is to heal a self, heal unfinished business, reform or create a more solid ego state, or put you in a position where you can be more, do more, have more, create more, in such a way that you can have more of what you want in your life, and that will make you happy. In quantum psychology, the purpose is to find out who you are. So what we're going to explore in this program is the one substance. And when that one substance condenses, we get what we call consciousness. Consciousness gives the illusion that there are more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 100, thousands, millions of different substances. But all the substances, no matter how they appear to be separate from the one substance, are actually all made of the same one substance, just in a different shape or form. The illusion is that they are different substances. So once there's a condensation from that one substance and consciousness is formed, illusions of I am here, you are there, and more and more and more substances begin to emerge. So what we're going to discuss at this point is the illusions that consciousness forms. Consciousness forms many, many, many illusions. Once the illusion of I am is formed, the consciousness actually becomes like veils that hide from you and me the fact that everything is made of that one substance. Now, it does not imply that there's some other force which somehow makes consciousness do this. Consciousness just does that, but it does that without losing its true nature of being made of that one substance. It would be as if we had a bathtub, and the water in the bathtub would be a metaphor for everything in the universe. And we took out 2 ice trays full of water, and we froze them into 12 or 20 or 30 different shapes, and we threw them back in the tub. So although each one of the ice cubes would appear to be different than the water and different from other ice cubes, the fact is all of those ice cubes would be made of the same water, only in a different form. The illusion would be that they were made of different substances rather than just water. Dissolving the illusions of consciousness is merely getting clear that the ice cubes are all made of water, so that ultimately they can dissolve in the water itself. My teacher was Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, and Nisargadatta Maharaj's focus was Advaita Vedanta. Advaita is a Sanskrit term which means one substance, not 2 substances. It basically means that in the universe, or everything that we know, perceivable or conceivable, is only made of one same substance. Hence his classic book, I Am That. That being the only language you could use to describe that one substance. Vedanta, the practical side of Vedanta, is in Sanskrit described as neti neti. Neti neti being not this, not this. That basically means that anything that is perceivable or conceivable, anything that comes up for you, any experience, thought, emotion, perception, all is to be discarded as not this, not this. So we have Advaita, one substance, and we have Vedanta, not this, not this. According to Nisargadatta Maharaj, and I quote, "The only way to find out who you are is to first find out who you're not." When they asked Nisargadatta, "Who are you?" his response was, "Nothing perceivable or conceivable." So in this way, quantum psychology is greatly different than other forms of psychology, because its purpose, again, is to find out who you are by first finding out who you're not, and that is done through a series of discarding whatever it is that arises in consciousness. Moreover, quantum psychology is not interested in you having a better life, a more successful relationship, better sex, more money, a bigger house, as most forms of psychology either implicitly or explicitly promise that you will have if you go through this. Not only that, quantum psychology makes absolutely no guarantees. Unlike most forms of self-help or psychospirituality that are presently presented in the world, there is absolutely no guarantee. It's not for everybody. There is no quick fixes. There is no, it's going to happen to you overnight. And there's no guarantee of results that if you do these particular procedures, you're going to get a particular outcome at the end of the rainbow. Because that's something that nobody can predict at all. And so quantum psychology specifically is not focused at all on a particular outcome, because no one can guarantee a particular outcome. Most people got into psychology to help people, and certainly most recently in the last 15 or 20 years, they got in as a career. I got into psychology for quite a different reason, which was my own personal pain. And so pain was the great motivating factor for me as far as getting involved with the field of psychology. When I was 18, I went off to college, but my parents had this idea that I should be a business major. And anybody that knows me personally knows that I don't even keep track of my checks. I have no idea how much money I have. I mean, I'm terrible at those types of things. But shortly after I got to college, I got involved with a girl in college, and she was a psychology major. I didn't even know you could actually major in psychology. I mean, I really couldn't conceive that you could actually go to school, and it wasn't this painful thing of accounting and economics. I could take psychology. But I was still kind of not even knowing how to do that. And in 1969, on my birthday actually, a friend of mine gave me a bunch of LSD. And so I took this acid trip, and when I came out of it, I was a psychology major. And the next day or two, I went down and I changed all my coursework. And actually, I never looked back after that. So I finished my undergraduate degree in psychology and went off to graduate school. But what I wasn't learning was I was very bored. I always knew I wanted to do this psychology thing, but I didn't have a vehicle. I didn't have a way to do that, because all, again, that was taught was Freud and Skinner. And what I wanted to learn was more, how do you do this? How do you do this? What is this thing that you do? And when I left graduate school, it was at that time that I ran into really probably the most important mentor I had in the field of psychology, which was Dr. Eric Marcus. And in those years, psychology that I got involved in was kind of the old, you go to groups, and there was Gestalt and Reichian work and psychosynthesis and psychodrama and transactional analysis. It was kind of the human potential movement of the early 70s in California. And the minute I saw Eric and the minute I got involved with that work, it was like a hand-in-glove fit. It was like instantly, not only did it feel absolutely right, but Gestalt therapy was the perfect thing for me. Because learning analysis, I used to fall asleep. It was so boring. You know, just kind of listening to this people ramble on. And all of a sudden I was in this therapy that was just here and now. What are you feeling right now? What are you doing right now? What's your experience like right now? Okay, feel it. And so, as we'll get into later in the part on the biological dimension and the organization of the nervous system, Gestalt therapy particularly was probably the best therapy that I was able to do, not only as a client, but as a therapist. And within 6 months, in my early 20s, maybe 23 or 24, I already had a practice and I started leading groups, and I was asked to train graduate students at Long Beach State University in Gestalt therapy. And I got so engrossed in the human potential movement and getting Rolfed and every form of body work you could imagine, and Reichian work and breathing work and rebirthing and all of these things, that after several years, I felt great. I felt more powerful. I had the bottom line of psychotherapy in that time, which was it was okay for me to feel what I was feeling. It was okay for me to say what I was feeling. It was okay for me to be where I was. But still there was a piece missing. And I was still some kind of pain that I knew therapy could not reach. And the pain was the same pain that I had since I was, 3 or 4 years old that I could consciously remember. And that was, I didn't know who I was. And what I thought, my idea was that as long as I didn't know who I was, then how could I possibly feel okay? The worst part was I never even met anybody who knew who they were. So about 1975, I was getting a Reichian therapy session, which is a breathing session. And all of a sudden, the only thing that I remembered is I kind of went into a glide, a feeling like I was gliding, and I saw a huge image of Avahut or Bhagwan Nityananda, who died in 1961. I didn't have that information that he died in 1961, but this image of this Indian saint. And that was the last thing I remembered. I had stopped breathing for about 4 or 5 minutes. And obviously I had gone into samadhi. And when I had come out of this place, Nityananda was my guru, but I didn't even know what the word guru even meant. This is like 1974 or 5 when this scene just had barely reached our shores except for Ram Dass's famous book, Be Here Now. And all of a sudden I realized that I really wasn't Stephen Wolinsky, that was absolutely a role, or it was like an act. It had nothing whatsoever to do with who I was. But by no long shot was that stabilized. And within 6 months, I met in New York Swami Muktananda, Baba Muktananda in New York, and took a meditation intensive from him, and we had a private meeting and so on. And within less than a year, I was in India. He had invited me to come. When I arrived in Ganeshpuri, India, in about January of 1977, there was one thing that concerned me, which was it didn't feel 100% right to me. Not that it was bad or good, it just wasn't right for me. It felt like most people were in a belief system. That if I do enough mantra, if I do enough seva or work or karma yoga, if I chant the name enough, if I do all these things right, if I surrender enough, then somehow I would be in this exalted state of Satchitananda, they would call it, existence, consciousness, and bliss for all of eternity. But at that time, I was only about 26 or 27 years old, and so I was very easily hypnotized. And before I knew it, I was in the game, not even realizing it was a spiritual game. Shortly after I arrived there, someone had handed me a book called I Am That, which was Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. And the minute I read I Am That, it felt so incredible to me. It was just such pristine clarity. But even though I read the book in about 1977, I didn't actually go to see him until 1979, even though it was only about 3 hours away. He lived in Bombay. I lived about 3 hours from Bombay. So years went by, and although I was playing the game of Muktananda to the best of my ability, doing the discipline and getting up at 2:45 in the morning and meditating and chanting and working and doing all of these things, still the pain was inordinately overwhelming. I still, after several years of maintaining a very, very strict discipline, did not know who I was. And again, it was pristinely clear to me that if I didn't know who I was, then nothing was really worth much. So, on my birthday, again, in 1979, I went to see Nisargadatta Maharaj. And I walked into this, what would be considered a slum, certainly in the West, in Bombay, and walked up these stairs. He lived in an attic. and there was like a ladder, and you would actually kind of go up the ladder to get into this little attic, which was probably, 12 by 12 foot room. It was not a large room. And he lived there since the 30s, so 40 years about when I had gotten there. And in the morning, he would have an arati, a chant, and then he'd have a short break and questions and answers, which lasted anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. And in the evening, they would have questions and answers for about an hour and a half. So I walked in, and it was a very unusual experience because most teachers that I met, or gurus that I had met, and I had met at that time at least a dozen, the energy felt like it was coming out of one particular point in space-time. But when I went to Sri Nisargadatta, I couldn't find him in the room because the energy was there, but somehow it was like you couldn't recognize him. And eventually I had to look at the pictures on the wall to find him, which I did. So they were doing this arati, and Maharaj used to stand there, and he had these big cymbals, probably the size of big plates. He'd be clanking these cymbals, and he was standing maybe 5-6 feet from me. Maybe there was 12 or 15 people in the room. And I turned around, and I saw a large, very large picture of Ramana Maharshi. And it wasn't like Stephen asked for something. It was more like something arose inside of me, which was, please just show me who I am. And I turned around, and Maharaj was looking at me, and he made like direct eye contact with me, which seemed like for half an hour, but it was probably about 30 seconds. Now, at that time, I did not know that the spirituality that I was doing was a game. I thought that I was spiritual. I didn't realize it was an identity that was an act, that it was not real. Now, being conditioned in India, and the conditioning looks something like this. If the guru tells you to do something, no matter what it is, you'll do it. And if you do it, you get liberated, enlightened, or something like that. If you don't do it, then you get the bad stuff. Now, obviously, this is a parental thing because it's very much like when you get brought up like a kid. If you do what mom and dad says, then you get the good stuff. And if you don't do what mom and dad says, you get punished and you go to your room or something like that. But if you do the right stuff, then you get more allowance, or you get hugs, or you get food, or you get something. But that was way outside of my awareness. I walked up to Nisargadatta and he said, how long have you been here? And I said, about 2 years. And he said, are you willing to stay 8 days and absorb the teachings? And I gave the absolutely perfect answer for somebody who was in the spiritual game with gurus, which is, whatever Maharaj wants me to do, I'll do. He looked at me like I was an idiot. He said, don't you understand? I don't play that game. If you want to play that game, you go somewhere else. He said, so if you want to stay, stay. If you don't want to stay, then leave. And I was in a total state of confusion. I was in a total state of confusion because I didn't even know it was a game. Not only did I not know that was a game, I also didn't know that I was age regressed, that I was acting like a child would with their parents. Like if my parents tell me to do something, I'll be a good boy and do it. I thought I was being spiritual. It was like what I knew all along, that there was something not right here. Really kind of clicked in, but it was incredibly painful because here I had lived in California. I had a psychotherapy practice. Everybody thought I was great. I had this whole thing, and I left it all to come to India. Years had gone by. I had no money. I had no relationship. I'm there in India with nothing whatsoever, given up my life. And now the worst nightmare, of course, is I realized that this was bullshit. This was just not true. That I was acting out my psychology, and no wonder I was still in pain. And they looked at me and he said, great sages like Muktananda, they're only into accumulating wealth. And again, my conditioning from being in the yoga thing for so long was not only was whatever the guru tells you to do, you do. If someone says something bad about your guru, you should leave. Because you should never even hear anything bad about them. You should have total faith and total trust. So there I was sitting with Nisargadatta, someone who I knew I could 100% trust. And the reason I knew I could trust him is because he didn't want anything from me. He didn't want my money. He didn't want service. He didn't want work. He didn't even want me to do anything. He just didn't want anything. So it felt like my body had burst into flames. And then he said, great sages like Muktananda, they tap you on top of the head, they awaken Kundalini Shakti. They're just amusing themselves. The pain, once again, was absolutely overwhelming. He was willing to force you to confront and look at anything. And so I was completely freaked out. So I went back to where I was staying, and Muktananda had been very kind to me. He had not charged me any money at all for many years. I didn't pay a penny. And he told me that I didn't have to pay anything. And shortly after I got back, I had these experiences of Nisargadatta coming inside of me and teaching me what he was teaching me, i.e. meditation in his form of meditation. So the main thing that Nisargadatta taught me was how to inquire and how to question everything, or as he would say, question everything, don't believe anything. It was like kind of who am I plus every different part of who am I, an inquiry. Anyway, shortly after that, Maharaj passed away. And it was a very funny experience because when Muktananda passed away in 1982, I got on an airplane, I was there probably within 36 hours. Maharaj passed away. He was so nothing, he was so void, he was so not, that even though he lived only 3 hours from me, I never even went to his quote-unquote funeral or samadhi. It didn't even occur to me. It didn't even rise to my consciousness because he wasn't. So Maharaj taught myself and everybody there too how to inquire, and nothing was kept sacred. You had to look at everything, question everything, don't believe anything. Nothing was sacred. And what was very critical for Maharaj, that for him, thoughts, ideas, theories, philosophies, concepts were to be questioned and discarded. Even the idea of sacred was to be discarded. So he was very, very confrontive. And for some reason, that felt really right for me. It felt really safe. In the past, I had been to so many different gurus, so many gurus. You'd ask a question, and they never were direct. They never were 100% direct. They'd tell you a metaphor, some story. Once there was a great god, and the god flew through the sky. And then these different stories, whereas Maharaj just really confronted your structures, your belief systems. Basically, he confronted the I that you thought you were, and he knew you were not. So I returned back to the United States in about 1982. I was teaching meditation for several years, and I got involved with Erickson work for a few years and wrote a book called Trance as People Live, kind of trying to bring together what had happened to me in India, along with the field of psychology, which was that you were always in a trance being defined as a shrinking of the focus of attention. So if I have a thought called I love myself or I hate myself, I identify with it and say that's me, and that is a trance. I also had been so moved by Capra's Tao of Physics and Fred Alan Wolf's books, and so quantum psychology began very slowly to evolve in the early 80s after my return. And the idea was to bring in quantum into psychology and organize it around the context of Advaita Vedanta. And it was really an ongoing process. I didn't wake up one morning and there was quantum psychology. And so what you'll hear today on these particular sessions is first an overview of what quantum psychology is and what it isn't, and why it's different from regular psychology and spirituality. The difference between quantum psychology and most forms of psychology is that the purpose of psychology is to have you have a more healthy self with better relationships, more money, feeling basically better about yourself. The purpose of quantum psychology is only to find out who you are. And that, according to Maharaj, is the only way to find out who you are, is to first find out who you're not and discard it. And how do you know what you're not? Well, anything that you think you are, you're not, and that should be discarded. Now, for many, many people, this is considered very, very confrontive, even abrupt, to say the least. But actually, if you're willing to look at what it is you think you are and actually inquire and question it very, very deeply, the I am, which is just beyond all of this, becomes very, very clear. And so I really would like to dedicate what we plan on doing over the next many sessions to the memory of Nisargadatta Maharaj. Nisargadatta Maharaj, Nisarga actually means the natural or the natural yoga, and I summarized 9 principles in my time with him that could kind of surmise where he was coming from and what he was trying to present. So the first principle is that there is only one substance. The second one is, what you know about yourself came from outside of you. Therefore, discard it. The third, question everything. Do not believe anything. 4, in order to find out who you are, you must first find out who you're not. 5, in order to let go of something, you must first know what it is. 6, the experiencer is contained within the experience itself. 7, anything you think you are not. 8, hold on to the I am, let go of everything else. And 9, anything you know about, you cannot be. Now, as we go through this series of lectures, you will always be able to refer everything to these basic 9 principles that Nisargadatta laid out. And so the only thing I want to mention for now is the I am. The most pivotal and unique part of Nisargadatta Maharaj's work is the idea of the I am, the experience of I am. So, although we'll spend lots of time going over this again and again and again, just for right now, the I am can be divided into 2 parts. The first part is the nonverbal I am. The nonverbal I am is without using any thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, attention, or intentions. So for a moment, right now, you can get a sense of I am when I ask you these questions. If you do not use your thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, attention, or intentions, are you a man, a woman, or neither? Without using your thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, are you defined, undefined, or neither? If you do not use your thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, attention, or intentions, are you limited, unlimited, or neither? If you do not use your thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, are you in a body, out of a body, or neither? If you do not use your thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, attention, or intention, what is it that needs to be healed? Or even better yet, what is healing? You can notice the blank no-state state or stateless state of no thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions. This, Nisargadatta Maharaj called the nonverbal I am. Anything after the nonverbal I am should be discarded as not this, not this. So let's say you're sitting now in that blank state of no thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, attention, or intentions, and an idea arises that says, I love myself or I hate myself. That's to be discarded and just stay in the nonverbal I am of no thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, attention, or intentions. In this way, you're holding on to the I am and discarding all else as not this, not this. For Nisargadatta Maharaj, if you were fortunate and lucky, if you were to hold on to the I am and let go of everything else, eventually, even the one that's aware of that blank, no state dissolves too. And there's just pure emptiness without anything to be aware of it. The second level of I am for right now is the verbal I am. What he would say is that the only thing you can say about yourself is, I am. Anything after that becomes in question. For example, I'm smart, or I'm stupid, or I'm bad, or I'm good, or I'm high, or I'm low, or I'm right, or I'm wrong. What he would say is, hold on to the I am. If you cannot hold on to the nonverbal I am, then just stay in I am and discard everything else. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm worthless, I'm alone, I'm unlovable, etc. Quantum psychology also contains some other pieces. One other piece which only validates the Advaita Vedanta of Nisargadatta Maharaj is quantum physics. Quantum psychology originated with Advaita Vedanta, and a context began to expand in the late 70s, of course, when the now very famous book, The Tao of Physics, came out. The Tao of Physics, to me, is probably one of the most important books of this quarter century, because it certainly was the hallmark and the leading book which began the process of the new physics, number one, and also the new physics as a part of or consideration into what would be called nowadays spirituality. From that book particularly, there was a lot of motivation on my part to include quantum physics, and specifically some basic premises of quantum physics as part of quantum psychology. The purpose of this was strictly to be able to attract people other than just your straight meditators or straight spiritual seekers. In other words, if I wrote these books based solely on the teachings of Nisargadatta Maharaj, it would reach a very, very small audience. But with the popularity of quantum physics and the new sciences, by including it, it was also able to draw the attention of new science buffs, physics buffs, even doubters that this thing was accurate. And so for that, I chose several principles within the context of quantum physics that felt very akin to what Advaita Vedanta was basically saying. So the first principle I wanted to use was that of John Wheeler. And of course, these people are all extremely well-known and well-acknowledged physicists. His statement is that nothingness is the building block of the universe. Obviously, we could spend hours or volumes just discussing this particular point. But if we went back to our prior exercise of what is the nonverbal I am, without using your thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, attention, what you get is a blank, no state. And without using your thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, attention, or intentions, are you perfect, imperfect, or neither? Without using your thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, are you worthy, worthless, or neither? If you do not use your thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, attention, or intentions, are you lovable, unlovable, or neither. In fact, if you don't use your thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, attention or intentions, what does the word love even mean? Now allow awareness, your awareness, to expand or to move or to fall backward and outward, noticing the big emptiness. Notice what occurs as you notice the big emptiness and how it appears to go on forever. Being aware of that, notice what occurs when I say, what awarer is awaring this? Now that pure nothingness, what John Wheeler said was that nothingness is the building block of the universe. What Einstein said was that everything is made of emptiness, and that form, like a chair or a thought, is condensed emptiness. Now, translating that into context of Advaita Vedanta, it means that that one substance, that emptiness, condenses down and becomes this physical universe, what you see, what you perceive, including your arm, your window, your wall, your hair, your chair, everything. And then it thins out and becomes emptiness again. But it's still only made of that same substance called emptiness or nothingness. What David Bohm said was that the universe is an interconnected whole, a seamless web. Now, obviously, if everything is made of the same substance, it's even more than an interconnected whole. It's just one substance. Seamless, no divisions, no boundaries, everything merging and part of everything else. Now, the famous statement, of course, of Werner Heisenberg is that the observer cannot be separated from that which it is observing. Now, let's say, for example, you're in no thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions, attention, or intentions, and a thought arises which says, I love myself, or I hate myself. Along with the thought comes the observer of the thought. So if I look through the observer, a specific observer, I see the thought called I love myself, and hence I experience reality through that lens, and I interpret everything through that lens called I love myself. If a thought arises called I hate myself, I observe and experience through the lens, through the filter of I hate myself. Each observer has a different observation, and what is experienced is through the lens of that particular observer and observation. Now, the illusion is that there is only one observer. So that I sit here and a thought goes by called I love myself, and then another thought goes by called I hate myself. But very, very subtly, what actually happens is that you have an observer called I love myself that observes I love myself, and they are all one unit. And the observer and the observed called I hate myself is one unit. So, notice a thought that might go by. It doesn't matter if it's bad or good or indifferent. Be the observer of that thought. Notice what occurs when I say, what observer is observing that? Notice another thought. Be the observer of the thought. Notice what occurs when I say, what observer is observing that? Now, in the workshops I've done for years, many, many years, most people, when I said what observer is observing that, they go blank. Because in that moment, they go beyond the observer-observed dyad. The observer-observed is one solid unit. The illusion is there's only one observer and different thoughts that go by. But let's try it another way. Just notice a thought that goes by. Be the observer of the thought. Notice what occurs if the observer of the thought and the thought are made of the same substance. Notice another thought. Be the observer of the thought. Notice what occurs if the observer of the thought and the thought are the same substance. Although there are lots of principles in physics, the next one I like, which is John Stuart Bell, appropriately called Bell's theorem. What John Stuart Bell discovered was non-locality, or basically, there is no such thing as a local cause. In other words, that since everything is made of the same substance, you cannot say that this isolated event that happened over here caused this event to happen over here. That there is no cause and effect relationship. Now, I'll mention here, but we'll get more deeply into this as we go on, and that is, this has huge implications, not only for the field of psychology, but also for the field of spirituality, in two simple ways. In psychology, if I have a problem in my relationship in the year 2001, the assumption is it's because I had a problem with mom and dad in 1951. That's the cause, and the effect is poor relationship in 2001. I'm going to ask the listener just to consider, if you have been in therapy or know people who have been in therapy for years and years and years who are still working on their relationship with their mother, possibly the problem they had with their mother has nothing to do with their relationship in present time, and that could be the reason why after years of therapy they still can't have a successful relationship. In other words, there's no cause. Psychology has pinpointed a false cause, and you're working on a false cause, which means that you can't possibly get results. Moreover, in the land of spirituality, the idea of karma. In other words, I'm reaping today what I sowed in the past. 4 lifetimes ago, I was a burglar and stole money, and so today my house got burglarized, and we're balancing some kind of karma. This is obviously a theory, but most people use it as an explanation and fact. In reality, there is only one substance, and you cannot isolate something in saying this particular event back then there in time created or caused this event here. Now, for many people, discussing this is going to push their buttons, to say the least. But Maharaj was so ferocious and so focused on getting you to look at things that you assume to be true, not only about yourself, but about a whole meta-psychology and philosophy that you've developed, that he ruthlessly wanted you to confront everything and discard everything as a concept, as an idea, an interesting idea, but that was all.